Hello, here I am again. I am Morgan, back with another Vladimir Nabokov book review. Surprise, surprise. And the book of today is Laughter in the Dark. And I thought I'd do things a little bit differently this time because the book of the day is Laughter in the Dark, which is a thriller. And I like to analyze my books, particularly Vladimir Nabokov books, really think about their themes and what the author was trying to do there. But I read Laughter in the Dark and I was on the edge of my seat. I was like kicking my heels up in bed. I was like going like like this multiple times throughout reading it. And I just feel like I need to get some of this basic booktube energy out. So in the first half of this video, I'm going to give you a kind of fan cam reaction video, just my raw thoughts about the book. And then in the second half, I'm going to step back, rein in that inner fangirl, and analyze it a little bit. So let's dive in. You guys already know that I am Nabokov's #1 stan. I am on a mission to read everything he's ever written, novels, nonfiction, you name it. So I was gonna get around to Laughter in the Dark / Kamera Obscura, its original Russian name, sooner or later. And I somehow managed to avoid spoilers on this one, and I'm so glad I did because nothing could have prepared me for the just barrage of wild and crazy things that happens in the plot of this book. There is no way to overemphasize how crazy the plot is here. The things that happen in Laughter in the Dark are grotesque, sadistic, like borderline torture. That's some of the stuff that goes down in Laughter in the Dark. Again, this is a thriller, or at least it was for me. And I say for me because there is a comedic side to Laughter in the Dark. A lot of the reviewers, particularly the academic reviewers, they'll call it a tragic comedy or a parody or a farce or a satire. These terms get thrown around a lot. And I see it. I mean, I'm not blind. There are many ridiculous and comedic elements to Laughter in the Dark. I was just so concerned about our protagonist that I couldn't really relax at any point. There are some really crazy things that happen to our poor main character here. Our main character is a guy named Albert Albinus, Alb, of course. Nab loved those alliterative names. And he is the prototypical pathetic little man that crops up so often in Russian literature. He falls head over heels in love with a young gold digger, and his life just completely goes to shit because of it. He is the cause of all of his own suffering. You know that you shouldn't feel sorry for him, but the sheer amount of bad stuff that happens to this guy over the course of Laughter in the Dark really pulled at my heartstrings, and I felt sorry for him. I just was I wanted to shake him and make him see what's going on around him, have him grow a spine, see that he's just being used. Oh my God, the irony. And then we have Margot. This is the girl that he falls in love with. She is like a stereotypical femme fatale gold digger. She's about 16 or 17 when we first meet her. And she knows right away that she is just going to be a vampire on this guy's money. She's draining him for every cent. It is pretty clear she's a villain. But the most upsetting thing that happened through Laughter in the Dark as I was reading it was that I grew to really hate Margot. Crazy, I know. Sometimes I think that it's a little bit cringy or embarrassing to say, oh, I found this character really unlikable. I really hated this character because, I mean, duh, it's the author's intention that you find a particular character unlikable. And especially with Nabokov, he's manipulating you. He's consciously marionetting you into feeling a certain way. And definitely you get the sense that you are being manipulated, that there is an authorial agent behind the situations here, because the situations that happen are just so ridiculous. They're so melodramatic and at their core cliche that you kind of have to know that you're reading a book, that these characters aren't real, which makes it even more embarrassing when I realize that I've just been feeling emotions over make believe. Then you have the second villain in Laughter in the Dark, who is Axel Rex. This is Margot's boyfriend, I guess you could call it. She's having an affair on the side with Axel Rex, unbeknownst to Albert Albinus. That means that Axel Rex is 1 degree more removed from Albert, so he can be even more cruel and callous and more of a villain to poor Albert. Now, Axel is an interesting figure because every time he was on the page, even though I knew he was a psychopath, he is literally sadistic, I still couldn't help but really enjoy him. And I think that's because he's obviously a Nabokov avatar. He's kind of an author stand-in, by which I mean that he's kind of been lingering in the background, invisible to the main characters since the beginning of the novel, similar to the author Nabokov. And he also shares with Nabokov some very specific artistic opinions. There's this great passage where Axel Rex talks about how all great art is deception, which is just such a Nabokovian line. I just needed to step back from the book and think about it for a while, just as a little bit of Nabokovia. Okay, so that was my rant on Laughter in the Dark. Thanks for following along, and I'm glad I got that out of my system. But now I can analyze the book a little bit. I want to think about Nabokov's choices and try to explain why he made those choices. The first thing I want to talk about is this very interesting shifting point of view. So this is the first The End book I've read where he shifts the point of view between multiple characters in the cast. Usually he stays in just one person's point of view, either first person or third person limited. But in Laughter in the Dark, most of the time we're in Albert's head, but then sometimes we're in Margot's head, and then sometimes we're in Axel Rex's head, and then he even goes sometimes into minor characters' heads, such as those of Albert's poor family. So my question is, why does he do this? Why does he make that choice here to give you that third person perspective? Because I think in most of his books, Nabokov is more famous for only giving you a limited perspective of a very obsessed and deluded main character, like in Despair, like in Pale Fire, like a guy who just doesn't know how everyone thinks about him. And I can just see that being the same way for Albert in Laughter in the Dark. He's the one who gets gaslighted. He's the one who has the wool pulled over his eyes. It could have been that kind of a book, but Nabokov wanted us to know what these other characters were thinking. So my theory as to why he does it like this is because I think he basically hasn't committed to the bit about truly challenging the reader. Laughter in the Dark is one of his earlier novels. It was written in 1933, so that's 20 years before Lolita, almost 30 years before Pale Fire, and it was written in Berlin during a very precarious time of Nabokov's life when he was probably just trying to make money. So he didn't try as hard to make you work through and struggle as a reader to put the pieces of the plot together in a diegetic text. So for me, I read Laughter in the Dark. Well, I listened to Laughter in the Dark in audiobook format. And usually with Nabokov books, I eventually have to pick up a physical copy just to reread certain parts of it and refresh myself and kind of get more of it. But that never really happened with Laughter in the Dark. I was able to understand the plot pretty much on first impression. It's just kind of clear. It's pretty clear as you go along that certain events are not as they seem, at least to Albert's eyes. So all of this is to say that Laughter in the Dark isn't as involved, isn't as complicated in its structure as later Nabokov. The second thing I want to talk about is this Axel Rex Albert Albanus dichotomy and how they both seem similar to Nabokov in different ways. I already did a video talking about biographical criticism as it relates to speak memory. And yeah, there I say it's a trap and Nabokov discourages it. Of course you would. But it's inescapable here. These two characters look a lot like Nabokov in different ways. So I've put this little table together with some of the traits that I noticed in these two characters and this one man. And the most interesting thing to me is that Nabokov as an artist looks a lot like Axel Rex. But Nabokov as a man in real life, he looks a lot more like Albert Albanus. Now, I wouldn't dare psychoanalyze Nabokov. He would probably stab me in my sleep from whatever plane he exists on now. But it's interesting, isn't it, that these two, Axel and Albinus, are two halves of Nabokov's personality. They're kind of distorted mirror images of Nabokov, and he's exaggerating the most extreme aspects of these two images for artistic effect. And that's part of the reason why ultimately I couldn't bring myself to hate Axel in the same way that I sadly hated Margot, even though he's just as cruel as Margot and he's literally characterized as torturing animals. So he's a psychopath. But every time he's there, it's a moment for me to realize that he's just a figment. He's just a character, and that Nabokov is the one actually behind the whole story, pulling the strings. And the last thing I will bring up is the existence of the alternate ending. Yeah, there's an alternate ending to Laughter in the Dark. They found it pretty recently, 2019, in Nabokov's papers, and it was translated by Olga Voronina, a Nabokov scholar, and published in the Times Literary Supplement. I will drop a link to it down below. Word of note, it is behind a paywall, but I was able to access it through my library, so I hope you can too. This alternate ending is fan service and just amazing. Like, I'm so glad that 90 years after Laughter in the Dark was published, we are getting more content, like bonus content. That is just out of this world incredible to me. And if you've read Laughter in the Dark, you gotta read this alternate ending, because the ending, as you're reading it, of the novel, you kind of know that the ending could go one of two ways. And this alternate ending is the other way it could have gone. So that in and of itself is just such a cool concept. So Olga Voronina introduces the excerpt in the Times Literary Supplement, and she kind of explains it by saying that it's part of Nabokov's moral development as an author. Like, he doesn't want to give a murderer a happy ending. But I don't really buy that explanation. I mean, first of all, I just don't like explanations where authors are implied to have morality or supposed to impart moral messages. I think that's just like a very cheap way of analyzing a work of art, especially Nabokov, who disdained any sort of didacticism or like big ideas in his novels. And then secondly, I just think that, yeah, like, it's cool to have this alternate ending, but ultimately I think the first ending, the original ending, just kind of makes more sense artistically and cohesively with the rest of the novel. And that's probably why Nabokov went with that rather than the alternate ending. I don't think this alternate ending has received a lot of scholarly academic attention, probably because it's just so new. But if you've read it, if you've read Laughter in the Dark, drop down in the comments below what you thought of the alternate ending, because I just think it is amazing. It's super exciting for a Nabokov fan to get more Nabokov. So those are my thoughts on Laughter in the Dark. It is a fantastic novel. I highly recommend it if it's not clear enough already. I encourage everyone to go out and read it. It is a thriller. It is fast-paced. It's super exciting. And it's Vladimir Nabokov. So, like, come on, get yourself a copy. Okay, thanks to everyone for watching, and I'll see you next time.